one of the things that we realize as we come to the end of our month of Love is Letting Go of Fear, what have we learned so far? It's an inside job, isn't it? It is not about what's going on out there. It begins and ends right here.
It sure does. And I'm reminded, I've been thinking of a story that I heard many years ago that impacted me deeply. It's a true story. Someone that I know. When this person was in college, she lived in a dormitory. And like, most of us, we have to wash our clothes. And she was in a laundromat in the dormitory, and she was alone in the laundromat. And when she was going to get the clothes out of the dryer, what she didn't know is that there was a man coming up behind her, and he grabbed her. He forcefully put her down on the ground, and he began to rape her. And as he was starting to do this at the beginning of this just horrific occurrence that's taken place in her life, somehow within her, she had the wherewithal to let her light shine, and she looked at him clearly in the eyes, deeply in the eyes, and said, "I am so sorry. I am so sorry for the hurt that you have experienced in your life for you to be here now." That man looked at her. He started crying. He met her words, and he stopped immediately what he was doing, and he left. And it was in that moment when she shared this story with me that I was so taken that no matter what was taking place on the outside of her, she met love where love is, everywhere. And that, I feel, is one of the most radical moves of taking responsibility for what I see. I see love no matter what. That was radical, to see love no matter what. And in that moment, she chose to choose love instead of fear.
So do you know you're part of our online community? Every time you watch us, you belong to CSLDallas, and we're so happy that you're part of our community. And we love providing you this kind of spiritual message. So if you want to keep seeing this, please donate. You can donate at csldallas.org/give, or you can text 972-954-4404. Be part of our community and sit back and enjoy the message.
And so the question comes, like, when things are taking place in our life, or am I reacting from a wounded place, or am I aligning myself with the spiritual truth, no matter what I'm seeing is taking place in the world or is happening with me? And Peter talked about this last week in such a profound way that I said, to hit this home again, that as spiritual beings, we cannot be harmed, we cannot be damaged. That's not the truth of our being. And so as I and we fully embody this, and we actually know this, then we can begin to see from a perspective of love, and that love does meet love no matter what. That love does see love no matter what, and that love is being love. And that fear is not, nor will it, run or control the situation or the circumstance. Jerry Jampolsky talks about this at the tail end of this book very well. And he talks about how we can and we tend to forget to instruct our minds to change our perceptions of the world and everything in it. That sometimes we forget that we can actually at any moment change our minds of the perceptions of the world and everything in it. We forget that peace of mind is an internal matter, and that it comes from a peaceful mind, that a peaceful perception of the world is experienced. It comes from inside us. Most of the time, he says, I see a fragmented world where nothing seems to make much sense. The bits and pieces of my daily experience reflect the chaos I see within. But he says today, he invites us to welcome a new perception of our own self and of the world. And he hits this point home very well. He says, I am responsible for what I see. It is my responsibility for what I'm seeing when I look through these spiritual eyes. Or am I looking through the human glass? I'm responsible for how I see others, individually or as a group. And perhaps a group that we may not like, consciously or unconsciously, or that we may be afraid of, consciously or unconsciously. I was flying home from Denver yesterday, and I got to have the first class seat on Southwest Airlines. And that's the bulkhead aisle, front row, right?
A1.
A1, due to some kindness of a Southwest employee, because I had B30. And there was a woman already on the plane. You know, it was a stopover, so there were already people on the plane. She was on the window, and I came and I claimed that nice aisle seat. And we got to talk, and she's coming here to visit her brother and some friends, and we got to have a great conversation. I gave her cards on CSLDallas, by the way. And so we were having this great conversation, and then a woman, because they said it was going to be a full flight, a woman asked, is that seat taken? And she was a nice, thin woman. I said, it is by you. And so I invited her to sit down, and no sooner had she sat down when they started to talk as well, and the woman on the window said, yeah, I just got off a cruise. She was excited. I just got off a cruise. And the middle aisle seat woman said, oh, no, really? Coronavirus. I watched it. We were all great until she said something, and there was separation. There was something that happened right there. And then the woman said, no, we were all checked and we're okay. But there are many things right now that if we let it, we could do this. So I'm really gathering that right now especially, so many of us, the vast majority of us, feel lonely, afraid, hurt, depressed, suicidal, not included. So many of us right now are feeling this. And so we're called to this personal responsibility of the inside out. Dr. Holmes calls us to this, and he says, only people with petty minds indulge in racial hatreds and distinction. God's perfect idea of humankind is the basis for every living soul, and we must believe this and act as though it were so. When we dislike people and groups, we are bearing witness to our small and limited viewpoints. He continues, the people in whom we fail to find good are born of the same mind, operate under the same law, and express the same life as we do. Our inability to see their divine origin is our self-created stumbling block. Often, we are held back by our petty dislikes of other people.
Yeah, and as Karen and I were talking about this over the last couple of days, you know, I'm the constant gardener, and I learned this in my garden. And when I go and I look at the flowers, especially if you go to the Arboretum in the next month or two for spring blooms, right? And there's just this profusion of flowers. And what do we notice? They're all different kinds. They're all different shapes, they're all different sizes, they're all different colors. And when we are growing a garden, right, we invite in all different kinds of flowers. And we don't actually say, oh, the irises are better than the roses are better than the pansies are better than the snapdragons. No, we build our garden out of this profusion of beauty, of diversity. Every flower has its gift, its perfume, the way that it looks, right? And sometimes spiritual people, we say, oh, well, we're colorblind, we don't see color. Well, if I didn't see color, my garden would be pretty boring, wouldn't it? It would not demonstrate that glorious profusion. No, actually, each and every color is important and necessary and beautiful. And sometimes a whole bed is just one type of flower. And it's glorious in itself, right? And every flower adds. Every bit of beauty is an expression of the divine light. And when we can see that, do you see, we see the preciousness and the uniqueness of each and every individual. Because even, I used to have this beautiful, beautiful volunteer rose around the back of my house when I used to live in a house in Capel. And it was this amazing, pink and yellow, and I'd had all these amazing colors. And I would go out there when it would start blooming, and I would examine it every day, because every rose on that bush was a little bit different. I'd never seen a rose bush like it. And sometimes it had more pink, and sometimes it had more yellow. And I wanted to see that. And I wanted to celebrate each and every rose in its perfection and its uniqueness. And that's the ability to see and to take responsibility, my responsibility for how I see that. Or do I say to one set of roses, wait, this is this kind of a bush. Why do you look that way? You're not doing it right. You're not being the right kind of rose. We wouldn't. Well, I actually do know people who would say that. It's just completely beyond me. But then I know people who say that about flowers they call weeds. You know what a weed is, right? A weed is simply a flower that's growing in a place where somebody doesn't want it. That's all a weed is. I used to make my neighbors crazy because I would let all those little purple flowers grow in my grass in Capel because they are so pretty. And I would not mow until they had finished blooming. Why are they weeds? Because they're purple and not green? Do you see? And so this helps us to see that we are seeing our job when we speak about fear, we are in fact seeing the differences of our humanity as frightening. But when we see with love, we see that essential nature that is our oneness, that is exploding into beautiful, unique, expressive creation. Now, this is not always easy. Karen shared a beautiful personal story about how I don't know that I would have been able to do that, right? What an extraordinary thing. Jerry Jampolsky shares another story towards the end of our book, Love is Letting Go of Fear. This is a personal vignette that happened to him in 1951 at the Stanford Lane Hospital, which was then located in San Francisco. The situation was one in which I felt trapped and immobilized by fear. I experienced emotional pain and thought I was being threatened with potential physical violence. The past was certainly coloring my perceptions of the present, and I was surely not experiencing inner peace or joy. I was called at 2 a.m. on Sunday morning to see a patient on the locked psychiatric ward who had suddenly gone berserk. The patient, who I had not seen before, had been admitted the previous afternoon with a diagnosis of acute schizophrenia. About 10 minutes before I saw him, he had removed the wooden molding around the door. I looked through the small window in the door and saw a man 6 feet 4 inches tall, weighing 280 pounds. He was running around the room nude, carrying this large piece of wood with nails sticking out, and talking gibberish. I really didn't know what to do. There were 2 male nurses, both of whom seemed scarcely 5 feet tall, who said, "We'll be right behind you, Doc." I did not find that reassuring. As I continued to look through the window, I began to recognize how scared the patient was. And then it began to trickle into my consciousness how scared I was. All of a sudden, it occurred to me that he and I had a common bond that might allow for unity, namely, that we were both afraid. Not knowing what else to do, I yelled through the thick door, "My name is Dr. Jampolsky, and I want to come in and help you, but I'm scared. I'm scared that I might get hurt, and I'm scared you might get hurt, and I can't help wondering if you aren't scared too." With this, he stopped his gibberish, turned around, and said, "You're goddamn right, I'm scared." I continued yelling to him, telling him how scared I was, and he was yelling back how scared he was. In a sense, we became therapists to each other. As we talked, our fear disappeared and our voices calmed down. He then allowed me to walk in alone, talk with him, give him some oral medication, and to leave. This was a powerful and important learning experience for me. At first, I saw the patient as a potential enemy who was going to hurt me. When I found a common bond in our fearful attitudes, he joined me there. And when I saw this patient as my teacher rather than my enemy, he helped me recognize that perhaps we are all equally insane, and that it is only the form of our insanity that is different. Yeah. And so, do you see, it is our responsibility. It's the responsibility of our light to see light and to be light to the best of our ability in every given moment. And of course, it's easy to do with our loved ones. Well, mostly. With our families, maybe. With our like-minded community, certainly. It's easy to do when we're alone on our meditation cushion. But the rubber meets the road when it's not so easy. When that thing outside is escalating around us. Jerry Jampolsky says, "In my mind are thoughts that can hurt me or help me. I am constantly choosing the content of my mind, since no one else can make this choice for me. I can choose to let go of everything but my loving thoughts for myself and everyone else." He goes on to say, "I am determined today that all my thoughts be free from fear, guilt, or condemnation, whether of others, by repeating, or whether of myself or others. By repeating, I can elect to change all thoughts of hurt. I am constantly choosing the content of my mind, since no one else can make the choice for me." And do you see how often we allow our emotional response, our reactive response, to make the choice for us? And by deciding to be the light, we make a different choice.
Yeah, so how do we change our thoughts and make those different choices? He gives us a great to-do. He tells us that we can repeat to ourselves whenever we feel that our peace is threatened. When our peace is threatened by anything or anyone, he says that we can repeat, "I choose to see the unity of peace instead of the fragmentation of fear." Let's choose to say that. I choose to see the unity of peace instead of the fragmentation of fear.
So another to-do, it maybe is something that you are familiar with, is the Ho'oponopono prayer, which comes from the ancient Hawaiian shamanic traditions. It's a part of a reconciliation process that comes out of the Hawaiian and Samoan islands. Many documented records of this being in a long ancient history. It was originally used as a process where families and villages could come together for reconciliation when there was hurt or abuse, or someone moved outside of the way in which the village agreed to engage with each other. In 1976, a woman named Morna Simeona, She was a kahuna. She adopted this traditional Ho'oponopono prayer of family mutual forgiveness to the social realities of the modern day. And so for this, she extended it both to the general problem-solving processes outside the family and to the psycho-spiritual self-help rather than group process. She saw in this something really important. When she passed away, her primary student, Dr. Len Hugh, carried on with this tradition. He was a psychologist, a psychiatrist, and he was trained in this shamanic tradition, although he does not consider himself a kahuna. So he was invited at one point to come into the Hawaii State Hospital. You may know this story. Into the most critical ward where they kept the criminally insane patients. It was an extremely dangerous place. Every patient, the 20 or 30 people that were in there, were shackled. They were in shackles. They wandered around in very constricted environments because they were physically dangerous to themselves, to each other, and to the staff. They had already gone through countless people to come in and work in this situation. And in desperation, they asked Dr. Len Hugh if there was anything he could do. So he came in, and rather than meeting with any of the patients, he sat down at the desk with each one of their files. And as he looked through each one of their files and read the information about them, he did this prayer. He worked on himself. He would repeat this mantra over and over again. And miraculously, gradually, all the patients began to heal. After a few months, Dr. Hewlin being there, patients who had been shackled started being allowed to walk freely. Others who'd been heavily medicated started getting their medications reduced. And those who had been seen as having no chance of ever being released in a 3-year period of time were released and freed. The staff also began to feel an extraordinary change in their engagement in this environment. What happened to change things so dramatically? Dr. Hewlin explained, I was simply cleaning the part of me that I share with them. I was simply cleaning the part of me that I share with them. He goes on to say, the only way I can explain it is this. Ho'oponopono recognizes that we are all part of one consciousness. And as such, everything that is in our experience is affected by our actions and reactions. We are responsible for everything we experience. Dr. Hewlin explains, total responsibility for your life means that everything in your life, simply because it is in your life, is your responsibility. In a literal sense, the entire world is your creation. That is radical responsibility. In the Buddhist tradition, we have the loving kindness prayer. May all beings be happy. May all beings be free. May all beings experience loving kindness. And it is an outwardly focusing loving kindness prayer. The Ho'oponopono prayer is an inwardly focused prayer. It recognizes it's an inside job and that it takes total responsibility. So the prayer is this. Imagining the person, the situation, the people, the group, the event, whatever it is, over and over and over again, the mantra is, I'm sorry. Please forgive me. Thank you. I love you. I'm sorry. Please forgive me. Thank you. I love you. Dr. Joe Dispenza speaks about this in a book called Zero Limits, and he said when he first started it, and it's true, when I first started it too, I was like, wait a minute, why would you forgive me for why would I ask for forgiveness for your behavior when it was your behavior? And he talked about how difficult and how challenging that is. What he is saying, we are living in a shared consciousness where if one person's consciousness changes, it can change the whole. This is what Gandhi meant when he said, in order to change the world, be the change you want to see. Be the change you want to see happen in the world. Joe Vitale wrote about Dr. Liu and this practice in zero limits and says, "Phew, this is tough to swallow. Being responsible for what I say or do is one thing, but being responsible for what everyone in my life says or does, that is quite another." This is an extraordinary opportunity for radical responsibility to be the light and to see the light as we view the world and others.
The moment, Jampolsky says, the moment we put our attention on helping someone, we cease to perceive ourselves as ill or in pain, and find meaning in the statement, to give is to receive. So one of the things that we got to enjoy and experience last week at our international convention was a service at Mile High Church. And our beloved friend and colleague, Dr. Michelle Madrano, shared the anchor, Ernest Holmes quote, that she moves from. And I had not heard it, and it really struck me. So I'm sharing it with all of us this morning. Ernest Holmes tells us that the biggest life is the one that gives the most, loves the most, includes the most, has the greatest understanding and the greatest consciousness of the eternal good, and redistributes this good to the largest number of people. Now, what I love about this community is it is unique throughout our international organization. We do include a really wonderful, large group of people. It is our purpose to be radically inclusive. And what I know is that each of us, no matter where we are right now in that inclusion, it can grow. And as things continue to happen outside of us and in our world and in our media and in our politics and in our work environment and in our family and in our neighborhoods and in our cities and when we travel abroad and all of that, this thing, we are the ones that are being called to tremendous personal responsibility to redistribute this good to the largest number of people.
Because we're all beings of love and light. That is the fundamental, ultimate truth, not only of each person here, but each person everywhere. We are all beings of love and light. And equally true, we're all funny bunnies. Every single one of us is a funny bunny. Do you see? And when we really see this truth with deep eyes, we recognize that everyone has a place at the feast of life. Everyone belongs at the banquet table. And our love is so vast and so big that we are not afraid to sit at the table with everyone.
I brought one more thing home for now. One of the speakers on our last morning, Dr. Maura Fox from Redondo Beach, a brilliant minister, friend, and colleague, she shared a video that I had not seen before. Our purpose here is to give the most, to love the most, and to include all spiritual beings. And so this is our prayer. We are going to be in this prayer together. It's a video. And may this video crack you wide open to include the most, as it did me on Thursday morning.